Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. Welcome on this presentation based on Musk. Who are we? We are the MDX consultant team. We are going to investigate today in Musk Group. The consultant team consists of Timothy, Keshav, Cynthia, Hansa, and I myself, Allan. We all know that Musk has been going through different challenges. How are we going to help them? This is our agenda of this presentation. First, we are going to have a look to the evaluation of the tools. We are going to see the challenges that Musk face, the possible solution for Musk to be profitable again, and finally the acceptance of solution. Now, Hansa will introduce you the tools.
First of all, we are going to see an overview of the tools used to diagnose the problems of Maersk Group. These tools will help to analyze the current situation of Maersk so as to find out appropriate solutions to the problems identified. Next slide, please. We are now going to have a deeper look at each tool, starting with the SWOT analysis, which is a basic way to begin the analysis by emphasizing on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the company. It will give immediate information about the business capabilities. Besides, it is easy to understand and can easily be shared to all the concerned staff of Maersk. In short, the SWOT will show where the company currently stands. However, the SWOT has been criticized since despite its popularity, its effectiveness has been questioned by managers and academics. We can see that there is a lack of prioritization after the different factors have been identified. Moving on to the next slide, we are going to talk about pestle analysis. This will give a bigger picture of the factors in which the business operates, that is political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. It will in fact analyze the main drivers of change in the strategic business environment. This will help the company and the consultant to understand the external trends affecting Maersk Group. However, researchers argue that the tool is too simple and insufficient since there are no internal factors analyzed. There is also a risk of getting too much data. This is known as paralysis by analysis. And finally, the pace of change makes it complex to anticipate developments.
When it comes to financial analysis, it is generally a document. It is a financial income document which is published either on a quarterly basis or annually. It helps to the managers of the company, such as Musk, to know how much profit has been done over a certain period of time. Is it profit? Is it lost? So we can be able to detect the pattern. This will help the company to take corrective actions if they are making losses or even if they are doing a profit. This confirms the strategy that has been put into place.
Moving on to stakeholder analysis. This tool gives an overview of the stakeholders having an interest in the organization. It helps to reconcile all interests according to importance or urgency. One limitation of this tool is that it must be performed on a regular basis in order to benefit from it. As you can see on the grid, there are stakeholders that need to be kept satisfied, for example, the government. Then there are other stakeholders that need to be managed closely, for example, investors, staff, clients, and directors. There are some that need to be monitored, that is, stakeholders or banks. And finally, there are those who need to be kept informed, for example, environmentalists. The next slide is the Pareto analysis. This focuses on the 80-20 rule, showing how a small leading line makes large contribution to the business. For example, the oil product line of Maersk in relation to revenue. The Pareto analysis also provides more insights where improvements are needed. It will also help to plan about important measures or actions to take with low-performing product lines. Besides, this tool allows better decision-making and time management. Some limitation is that the root causes of problems are not identified. It only shows qualitative data, and it is only applicable for specific cases.
The
Moving
problem
on to the
diag Moving to the problem diagnosis structure, here we are just asking what is the problem, where is the problem, and why the problem does exist. So what is the problem? It can be a gap, problem in the profit gap. So we have to know where is the problem. Is it in different subsidiaries, different departments? That is why we are going to decompose it by segment. Why is the problem? Is it the problem in a specific segment? What is the issue there? From this, we're going to have a hypothesis. Is this causing the issue? Is this causing the whole issue in the company? And therefore, we are going to have a key question that will help us for the solution.
Moving on to the next slide, we have answer matrix. This tool will help to determine new directions for the business in terms of risk and possibilities. It will also help to provide possible strategies for growth for Maersk Group. It is easy for the consultant to conduct and analyze. It helps in assessing the possible alternatives for Maersk Group and shows the opportunity cost. The limitation is that it is a theoretical model. It is difficult to make accurate prediction, and it doesn't take into account Porter's 5 forces. Next slide, please. Let's now have a look at the BCG matrix, which produces a framework to allocate resources among different product lines of Maersk Group. It helps to remove weak business units once the dogs of Maersk have been identified. It is quite a comprehensive tool and easy to explain by the consultant. It helps to decide and prepare for future action. It is an applicable tool for big organizations like Maersk Group, which seeks to evaluate balance in the company's current portfolio. Furthermore, the tool helps the company to ensure long-term revenues by balancing products which need investment with products that should be managed for remaining profits. The limitations are market not clearly defined in this model. It can be difficult to obtain data about market share and market growth. The model neglects small competitors that may have fast-growing market share. Let's now move on to the next slide. Which is the McKinsey 7S framework. It shows the elements that are linked with each other and how a change in one of these affects the others. This tool can be applied by analyzing the current situation by using a checklist of questions for all the 7S, then find out the gaps and inconsistencies between the current and proposed future situation, then work on an action plan to achieve the desired situation, and finally implement that action plan. The strength is that it shows the bigger picture of the change. It allows the organization to work on a plan to reach a desired situation. It helps various departments and processes to collaborate with one another. The weaknesses are this tool is a complex one, since a lot of research and benchmarking are involved. Support of senior management is needed, and the external environment is omitted in this tool, since it only looks at the internal environment.
So let us now look at the Porter's 5 forces. Porter's 5 forces is simply a tool that will allow us consultants to better understand the competitiveness of the business environment of Maersk. This model allows us to tap into the organizational forces that could affect the business profitability and the environment itself. So with this tool, we are able to explore the rivalry of competition in the shipping industry, analyze the buyer and supplier power that affect Maersk, and identify substitution that could threaten Maersk's operation. Let's check out the Vrije model. So the Vrije model allows for the evaluation of Maersk's internal and external resources if the company has a competitive advantage. So the following questions have been asked applying this model. So the first question, does Maersk have any resource that adds value to their customers? No. Does Maersk have any resource that can be categorized as rare? No. Are the services provided by Maersk easily imitable? Yes, since the shipping industry is flooded with competitors. Is Maersk an organization ready to capitalize on any resource or capability in the market? Well, based on the decline in profits, Maersk is not ready at the moment. As such, by applying this tool, it can be deduced that Maersk does not have a competitive advantage. Let's move on to the S-curve. So the S-curve is simply a tool that will allow us to assess the life cycle of each of Maersk's products or services. This company offers a wide array of services such as fuel transportation and shipping. By using the S-curve, we will be able to have a better insight on what product or service has reached maturity or is in its declining phase or is in its declining life cycle phase. In Maersk's case, this mainly applies to its petroleum subsidiary. Based on the information of the financial report, as well as the case study itself, we can see that the petroleum industry has been spiraling down in the recent years. This is due to the fact that new renewable energies and as well as country regulation regarding fossil fuels has impacted this industry. As such, as per the S-curve model, the petroleum industry and its products have reached maturity and is now in decline. So now let us explore about the challenges faced by Maersk Group.
Thank you, Keshav and Hansa, for an overview regarding the tools that can be applied to find out the challenges faced by Maersk Group. As you can see, in 2014, Maersk Group had a profit of 5,195 million, around 5.2 billion US dollar. In 2015, the profit is 925 million. This represents a decline of 4,270 million. This is a huge decline. As we can see here, what is the problem? The problem is there is a gap of 4,270 million. As we all know, the simple calculation to calculate profit, we need to have the revenue minus cost. Here we can see that the revenue, we are assuming that it keeps on increasing, but we are assuming that the costs remain the same. Further, we can decompose what is revenue. Revenue can be explained by the volume gap, which has increased for Maersk, as well as for the price that has decreased. Moving to the cost, which can be split, decompose, variable cost and fixed cost. There, it has remained the same. We are assuming that these are causing issues to the company Maersk. So let's have a look. Where is the volume gap from different subsidiaries? There are four main subsidiaries of Maersk: Maersk Oil, Maersk Line, APM Terminals, and other businesses. Here you will notice is the losses made by each subsidiaries. Huge losses have been recorded for Maersk Oil, minus $1,085 million, followed by Maersk Line, $1,038 million, APM Terminals, minus $246 million. Regarding for the other businesses and allocations, we have lost $206 million. Moving again to the Maersk Oil, which can be further decomposed, we have the Maersk Drilling and Global Drilling. They have contributed to the loss of $1,285 million. The increase of loss of Maersk can be shown here precisely for Maersk Oil. In 2014, it was losing money, minus $86 million. The loss has increased in 2015, minus 2,146 million. This is huge. And generally, we can see Maersk Line, APM Terminals, and other businesses were in decline as well. This is the general a timeline that we did for Maersk Oil from 2010 to 2015. We noticed that from 2010 to 2012 there was a growth. Unfortunately, however, the decline started from 2012 up to 2015. Let's apply the Pareto. Here we can see 80% of the loss in Maersk Group is due to Maersk Oil, which is affecting the overall performance of Maersk Group. Cynthia, now we give you more information about the other subsidiaries such as Maersk Line, the APM terminals. The floor is yours, Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Allan. So here we shall see the other challenges are in the Maersk Line, exactly in the container shipping services, where we see a loss of $1,038 million. Where exactly? This will be in the cargo, in the container, and in the referrers. And here we see that they operate 5 brand names: brand 1, brand 2, brand 3, brand 4, and brand 5. The next challenge will be in the APM terminals, where we see another loss of $246 million. But where exactly is the challenge? It's in the Maersk Supply Service, where we see $54 million lost. And then in the Maersk Tankers, here we see an increase of $28 million. And then in Damca, there is also an increase of $274 million. And lastly, in the CIVTA, where there is $150 million. Here we shall also see now an increase of the volume gap from the different subsidiaries. Why is there an increase? Because of stagnant global trade. Why is there a stagnant global trade? Because of the oil prices and then the decrease in freight rates. But why are there a decrease in freight rates? This is due to overcapacity and then competition. So we go further ahead and talk about the oil prices. We decompose why oil prices have an issue. This is because subsidiaries were affected. But why were they affected? This is due to low demand. And then also the low demand is brought by oil producers cutting back on production volume. And this is because there is exploration and drill costs that are rising. Why is that an issue? It's because they needed to maintain production and all other costs. Why, again, we ask, this is to ensure a steady volume. Why? Because we need we see that projects were deferred and cancelled, and this is why oil prices kept failing. So here we shall see, if we take a second, we shall see crude oil prices per barrel from 1986 to 2016. But here you'll see that the prices are low, and then they pick up again. They go up high around 2007 and 8, and then take a dip in 2009, and then pick up again in 2013, and then go low in 2016. Next, we shall see that decreasing freight rates as another challenge. We ask ourselves, why again is this a challenge? Because of oversupply, and then also there is overcapacity. But why is there oversupply? There is oversupply because of high competition. We see that there are 19 competitors in this business with Maersk. Why is this the case? This is because this business can easily be imitated. Then on the side here of overcapacity, why is there overcapacity? This is because small vessels are being replaced by the bigger ones. This was done to bring down per unit cost in order to reduce fuel costs. Now we move on to the next slide, which talks about supply and demand growth in the container shipping business at Maersk. So again, you'll see in 2013, the demand and supply, it keeps fluctuating up and down until we have here in 2016, in the third quarter, where it goes really low. In 2015, or in the fourth quarter, where it goes really low. Next slide, please. So the question here and the conclusion that we are making is that there is a profit gap of $4,270 million, which means there is also a revenue gap and then a volume gap. We've already looked at our subsidiary, Maersk subsidiaries, Maersk Line, Maersk Oil, and other business allocations. There is a stagnant rate, but the hypothesis now is that the huge decline of profit is due to the Maersk Oil. Now, we have a key question: how to minimize the decline of profit for the Maersk Group? And now I'll leave the floor for the solutions.
Thank you, Cynthia, for this presentation when it comes to the challenges which is being faced by Maersk Group. Now, each problem we need to have solution. Here, we are going to propose you 3 possible solutions. The first one, it might be a reduction of fleet. Second, create a renewable energy company. And third, why don't we acquire 50% of shares of Hamburg, which is one of our competitors? We, as a consultant, we have to know what the area we are going to investigate, what are the possible outcomes. Here, definitely, our target area is Maersk Group. So what is the decision outcome? We have to focus on profit maximization for the company. The scope of service, we need to adapt the strategy to maximize profit and reduce cost for Maersk Group. As we saw earlier that the cost has remained the same and the volume gap keeps on increasing, the revenue gap keeps on increasing. The scale, there is a need to remain the market leader. We have to be competitive wherever the situation is. So how can we do it? Either by growing by purchasing 50% share in Hamburg, one of our competitors, as I said earlier, diversification in renewable energy, maybe, or reduce fleet capacity and adjust our frequencies to our ports. And yes, the last thing is about cost. Reduce both fixed and variable cost. The fixed cost can be reduction of salaries, the required crews on board. The variable cost, there is a need to reduce the fuel consumption, as the fuel consumption accounts for each voyage 70% of the total cost. What is the outcome when we are going to reduce the fleet? So we will have to reduce, we will have to return or retire all vessels to the lessors. The ship that Maersk own can be sold for scrapping. This will reduce cost by 50%. Unfortunately, this will lead to the reduction of employees' benefits for 3 years. We need to have a strategy for the short, medium, and long term. But for the next 3 years, the employee benefits should be reduced. And we think that the total cost that can be reduced will be 20%. And finally, 30% of the outcome will be to operate modern and new vessels. So let's now go a bit into detail about the retiring and return of all vessels to the lessors, as we have said previously. So when we are going to reduce or return the vessel to the lessors or going for scrap, the frequency on routes has to be reduced, specifically on unprofitable routes that will allow the company to save money. By having a reduced fleet, this will reduce overcapacity, allowing vessels to operate efficiently. By operating less vessels, there will be less insurance to be paid. There will be less crews working on these ships. There will be less port charges that we will be see later on. Again, by having less vessels, this will reduce the overhead costs. That is, people working in the head office. Less people will have to work on the ships, preparing the papers, the crew sketch, the crew scheduling, and the planning, and all these things. Just imagine how this can reduce the cost of the company. Above all, this will reduce the voyage cost. What do we have in the voyage cost? As we said that we need fuel for these vessels to move from point A to point B. By having a reduced fleet, by operating a modern fleet, the fuel consumption will be reduced by 45%. When it comes to the port charges, since there will be less frequencies between point A to B, the port charges will be reduced by 30%. But what do we really have in the port charges? We have the towage fees that will be decreased considerably. The berth due fees will be decreased. The pilotage fees, the light service, the port stay, the departure fees will be decreased, and the wharf due will be decreased as well. This will contribute to improve the profit margin of Maersk Group. Finally, so since there will be less frequency about point A to point B, so we will not pay the canal dues as it used to be. The cost will be reduced by 25%. Unfortunately, we will have to, which leads to the reduction of employees' benefits for 3 years. Costs can be reduced by 20%. So we suggest that the outcome that will happen, the salary must be reduced by 20 to 30%. Bonuses can be reduced by 35 to 45%. Reduction of overtime by 50%. Why we are saying that there should be a reduction of 50%? If we suspend it completely, the staff won't work. We will not be competitive. We all know that training costs a lot of money. There are some trainings that are mandatory and some that are not. So let's keep the mandatory training for all the staff, which are really important. And yes, we know that ships can carry, let's say, 40 crews for a voyage. So why can't we just operate a voyage with a minimum crew, which will definitely improve our profit margin as well as decrease our cost. Operating new and modern vessels, definitely the cost of maintenance will be reduced by 42%. Why? Because when we operate all vessels, maintenance costs a lot, but the outcome is that there will be less routine check, the decreased use of oil, less grease which will be used for ropes, and yes, less technical problem. We will be always on time. Now, Keshav will introduce you the hypothesis for solution 1.
So thank you, Allan. So based on everything you just said, so the main hypothesis can be as follows. The reduction of fleet will help Maersk Group to reduce the cost by 65%. So we have divided it into two parts, mainly sub-hypothesis and underlying assumption. So the sub-hypothesis is the retirement and return of all vessels will help to reduce the company's costs. So what can be assumed is that it will reduce the frequencies of the unprofitable routes. The voyage cost will also be decreased. This will lead to a reduction of staff, and thus less money will get out of the company. And more modern vessels will mean that the reduced costs such as maintenance, and they will be able to operate more efficiently. So now let's test the hypothesis using the inductive inferencing, which is based mainly on assumption. So here we can assume that Maersk reduced the number of its fleets, employees' benefits, and use newer vessels. We assume that the overall cost is decreased and more revenue is generated. Therefore, it can be concluded that with a reduction in fleet size, employee benefits, and by using newer vessels, Maersk is able to reduce the total expenditure and generate more revenue. So now let's see the second solution, which is renewable energy. So solution 2 is about renewable energy. That is, Maersk invest in renewable energy to bring down their cost and increase profits. As such, the company will be able to minimize its operational cost by 65% by becoming a green company, and by an additional 45% by developing its own renewable subsidiary. So here it is either or. So by going green, this will generate around 35% more revenue, with the fact that they will be able to charge premium prices based on their new social responsibility claim, and an additional 10% by salvaging its all unused fleets. By going green, this also means that Maersk is able to improve its environmental image, which can bring revenue up to 30%, as they will benefit from up to 10% in taxes and incentive, and around 20% by using their new green status while marketing their services. On the other hand, the renewable subsidiary is expected to generate around 45% by creating their own renewables solutions, such as solar panels can decrease cost and increase revenue by 25% compared to developing hydrogen propulsion ships, which can generate 20% revenue. Revenue from the renewable subsidiary can be in the form of solar panel fleets, lower maintenance cost overall, and achieve a zero-emission shipping. As such, it can be seen between these two solutions, that going green will in fact generate more revenue by up to 65% compared to the renewable subsidiary solution, which brings only 45% revenue. So now let's formulate the hypothesis. So the main hypothesis can be formulated as follows. Investing in renewable energy will enable Maersk to generate 35% more revenue and decrease energy expenditure by 25%. So again, we've divided it into two parts, the sub-hypothesis and the underlying assumption. So the sub-hypothesis is investing in renewable energy will allow Maersk to generate revenue and reduce cost. So what we can assume is that Maersk will be able to charge premium prices on social responsibility claim. They will generate income by selling or scrapping their old ships, and implementing solar panels will reduce the energy expenditure furthermore. We will now test it using the inductive inferencing as previously done. So everything here is based on assumption again. So here we assume that Maersk is converting its operation to go green. What happens is that we assume that this will lead to a general expenditure that is decreased, total expenditure which is decreased, and we assume that by adopting these, a green strategy will basically allow Maersk to decrease their energy expenditure further and generate more revenue. So now let us look at the third and final solution, which is acquisition.
The third solution we decided on was the acquisition of 50% shares of Hamburg SUD. We aim to acquire this for over $100 million. Doing this should reduce the overcapacity in the industry, and the combined effort to help improve the efficiency in operations will reduce the unit cost. Another outcome of this is that acquiring Hamburg will create an increase in demand, which will also create a gap that needs to be filled, and Maersk can fill that space and offer their services. This will give Maersk more market power and improve returns. Acquiring Hamburg will also lead to a reduction in the market competition. This is because Hamburg SUD owns 2.7% of the industry's market share, and acquiring this will give us a part of that market. This will increase the barrier to entry, as Maersk will have a bigger effect on the market and are able to control and offer more than most companies in that industry. Acquiring Hamburg will also complement organic growth in Maersk, and with that revenue generated, we can invest more into services that we're into, like the airline industry and the supermarket industry. So we move to the hypothesis right now. Our main hypothesis is that acquiring Hamburg SGD will lead to an increase in demand and create a gap in which Maersk can facilitate with the capacity they have. A sub-hypothesis is that acquiring Hamburg SGD will expand the possibilities for growth of Maersk instead of just focusing on costs. And with this hypothesis, we have the following underlying assumptions. We assume that Maersk Group has enough capital to acquire a smaller company like Hamburg SGD, and we see that they do, as Maersk has over 15.8% of the industry's market share. We also assume that there is potential for an increase in demand, as Maersk Group will control a larger part of the industry supply. The final assumption is that for this solution, Maersk has the ability to sustain the required market. The problem has always been lower demand, and the industry, Maersk will be able to solve this by having a larger share in the supply, a larger share in the market, and shedding their supply. And this, we go to the hypothesis testing. We use the inductive inferencing, as it gives a broad generalization of results from specific observations. And this shows that acquiring Hamburg SGD will allow Maersk to expand their market, which we also believe will increase the revenue in the company. And all of this will increase the barrier to entry, as Maersk will have a cost advantage above other companies. This advantage will not be able to be easily replicated by other industry, and it will also make other people that want to go into the industry. All of this will increase the barrier to entry, as Maersk will have a cost advantage that cannot be easily replicated by other companies. And it will also increase the amount of control Maersk has over the industry, thereby solving part of the problem regarding overcapacity.
Thank you, Timothy. So now we will check out the Harvey's balls, which will indicate the certainty of our proposed solution. So Harvey's ball here is used to evaluate basically the certainty of all three solutions that we've proposed. We can see that a reduction in fleet has the biggest overall impact on reducing cost and generating revenue compared to the other solutions like renewable energy and acquisition. So contribution to result. We can see that a reduction in fleet brings the most contribution to results, with the acquisition bringing the lowest, as there is always a degree of uncertainty, such as market demands changing when doing an acquisition. Ease of implementation. Reduction of fleet is the easiest to implement, as the solution is found within the company itself. That is, reducing their fleet size and employee salaries is in their total control. On the other hand, renewable energy takes a bit more planning to fully implement properly, and acquisition is the hardest solutions to implement due to the tricky nature of mergers and acquisition. Risk. Reduction in fleet brings the least amount of risk. As stated above, since they are in total control of the solution, they can always revert back and modify it. Whereas renewable energy, on the other hand, is a bit more tricky due to constant innovation in this industry, in the renewable industry, as new and more effective solutions are always being developed. Finally, acquisition is the riskiest solution proposed, as if Maersk is unable to generate enough revenue with the acquisition of Hamburg, this will lead to a catastrophic financial failure for Maersk, which is a company that is already making a decrease in profits. Therefore, we can see that a reduction in fleet has the biggest overall impact on reducing cost and generating revenue compared to other solutions such as renewable energy and acquisition. Now let us put together a realistic scenario of our chosen solution, that is reduction in fleet.
Thank you so much, Keshav. Now we understood we are rejecting renewable energy and acquisition. So Maersk will reduce the fleet. So let's have a look. We are in the environment. The environment, let's say it is stable. We now be able to account how it's happening, how the demand is. This is the first scenario. The second scenario is about unstable environment, where there is a further deterioration what is happening. So let's say we reduce the fleet. What will happen if we are in a stable environment? When Musk reduces the fleet, we can clearly see that Musk will reduce loss by 70%, which is very positive. However, if Musk is not reducing its fleet, therefore there will be a loss of 30% from the actual profit, that is 925 million. The other option is, let's say that the environment is further deteriorating. So Musk do reduce the fleet, we are able to reduce the loss by 82%. Otherwise, if we don't take these actions, we are going to make other losses, 18%. Because here, why it is only 18%, we are assuming that we already reduced the fleet, but is there a need to reduce furthermore? Yes. So this is the expected profit for the next 3 years that Keshav will give you further details.
Yes, Alan. So as you said, possible reduction in loss, which means there will be more profit in the next 3 years. So with the clustered chart above, this provides a visual representation of the profits that will be generated by each solution over a period of 3 years, where a reduction in fleet generating up to 4 billion in profits compared to renewable energy, which is just above 2 billion. With the acquisition of Hamburg proven to be the least effective, generating less than 2 billion. Let's further expand this on a waterfall diagram. So the waterfall diagram provides us with the contribution in profits of reducing the number of fleets. So with only 925 million profits in 2015, adding the contribution of 3 billion with the reduction in fleet solution, this leads to a total profit margin of 3,958 billion in total profits over the next 3 years.
So now we are going to implement solution 1. What is solution 1? Is the reduction of fleet. We saw how it's going to contribute to the company's profit, how it's going to improve the profit margin. So here we have 3 outcomes: retire and return all vessels, reduce employee benefits, operate young vessels. So what will happen when we are going to retire and return all vessels? First, we have to all lease vessels have to be returned to all the lessors with whom we pay a monthly lease. This accounts in our income statement. Therefore, there is a need to cut out this cost. In addition, we have to sell all owned vessels having 20 years of experience. They will be sold for scrapping. This will help for actually decrease the cost. There will be no more insurance that has to be paid, as well as the old vessel will not consume much more energy, fuel as the new one. Since there will be less vessel, the employee benefits has to be adapted. Let's have a look to it in depth for the reduction of employees' benefits. We suggest that it has to be for the next 3 years, as we cannot properly assume the extent the crisis will go on, the uncertainty. As we said, the top manager's salary, their salary must be decreased by 30%. The middle manager's salary must be decreased by 25%. The lower level employee's salary must be decreased by 20%. Bonuses must be reduced by 35 to 45%. What are the bonuses that are being provided by Musk? We have the performance bonus, attendance performance, annual bonuses. Therefore, let's reduce it. The performance bonus by 30%, attendance performance 25%, and the annual bonuses, we will reduce it by 45%. And the profit sharing, the dividend, must be suspended until further notice to all shareholders that are accounted to have a dividend. So by operating modern vessels, so we will have to operate vessels that are less than 20 years. So all these vessels, if we really want to reduce the cost, why a vessel should operate with 30 crews? Let's go with only 20-25 crews, a minimum of crews. This will not affect the security and safety of the vessel during the voyage. We should ensure that these vessels are used to the maximum to ship between point A to point B. We have to use these vessels on busy routes where the demand is very high, ensuring that this is contributing to the profit margin of the company. And we should make other people know that we are using modern fleet. So we should advertise Maersk Group. A budget of $250,000 should be allocated. So we are going to invest it in magazine, specialized websites such as Maritime Executive to inform potential and existing customers that we are using more efficient vessels. We will use magazines such as Maritime Magazine to market there, to advertise, as well as we are going to contact our existing customers and suppliers to inform them, yes, we are using modern fleet. So, having this solution, reduction of fleet, and we saw what are the actions that should be taken. How are we going to convince this? I leave the floor to Hansa and Cynthia that will give us further information.
Thank you so much, Alan. So like we have seen the solutions that have been suggested, and now we're going to look at how to convince our Maersk Group clients on how to implement these solutions. First, we shall use this strategy, which is called Sequential Approach. It's a mix of the Lewin's model and then also the McKinsey 7S step model. What do? We unfreeze, move, and refreeze. This is how we are going to gain control. We shall start by monitoring the first actions. Then when they adapt, we continue to monitor again. The first step here is to form a team within the Maersk Group of only the managers from the top to the bottom level. Then we shall develop the plan, which we shall incorporate with the 7-step model. And then we shall create an agency. That means we are going to show everyone the result gap that was found. And then also we're going to communicate the solutions. So we're going to look at all the 3 solutions that have been suggested until we implement only one. And then also to start small, we shall involve more people. Then we move on to increasing the scale by implementing the change. And lastly, reinforcement, which in here we can do with celebrating success. So the second thing that we shall do here is having a high-level plan using a cascade model. Here we have board of directors as the first people we communicate to. And when they agree to the solutions that we have made, they will then communicate to the executive board, who will develop a mid-level plan. Then they will also communicate to the mid-level management, who will develop a low-level plan, and then communicate it down to the low-level employees of all the Maersk Group. This helps us to have everyone on board. On this next slide, we shall look at the creation of agency. What does this mean? It means we are going to examine if Maersk is ready for change. With any change, there will be resistance. So now we have to create awareness, first of all, at Maersk. This means that the company should know that it's doing poorly. And we are going to do this by showing them the result gap. We are showing the result gap to all stakeholders. And then lastly, we are going to present to them the bad news. What is the bad news? It is the profit gap of $4,270 million. And then we're going to tell them about returning the vessels, reducing the salaries, the benefits and administration costs. And lastly, we shall talk about employees being laid off for the company to right size. The next step that we will cover is how employees will respond to this change. So we know that when people receive bad news, they will be shocked at the first sight, and then there will be denial, of course. And after denial, there will be bargaining. Some people want to stay, others, when it comes to like reduction of fleet and all that, of course, there will be some bargaining over there. And then also there will be anger when salaries are reduced. With all this comes guilt from the management level because of what's happening. There could be some depression that will be caused, but we make sure that this is unlikely to happen, or that it will happen at a lower point. And lastly, it will be acceptance. When all is said and done, people will have to accept the changes. Next, we shall have to communicate the solution. This is a very important step in what we are doing. So here we're going to communicate the reducing of vessel fleet, creating renewable energy, acquisition of the Humber at $100 million. This is important to inform everyone upfront of what is happening, but we're going to do this at board meetings with the directors. Then after informing the directors, we can then tell every other stakeholder. We as the consultants are the ones who are going to have this task. It will be delegated to us. This is because we make all the announcements regarding the report so that there is no bias. It's an objective thing that we are doing. Then we shall communicate the vision and emphasize reduction of costs so that people know that the vision here is to increase the revenue, reduce costs, but also grow the profitability of the company. The next thing will be to pass on new expectations, incentives, regulations of the company to the employees, because it's a new system. If there's going to be acquisitions that are done and all this change management. So then we shall deal with skepticism, and because there will be uncertainty. So we need to be straightforward and inform those who are leaving on what is going to happen. And salary reduction, we're going to just be very open and honest and straightforward. So we can do this through workshops with the Maersk employees so that they can have questions they ask and they can be answered, and also to have feedback on the whole situation and clear up assumptions that are being made. Lastly, we shall repeat communication and have all these steps repeated over again, and it will be a culture at Maersk. And we shall do this by creating a user's guide. I now leave the floor to Hansa to continue with the 5th step.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Let's now elaborate on step 5 of implementing the change, which is about starting small by involving people. So people need to be empowered and developed through training and development. This will help to align everyone with the change. Also, there needs to be introduction of new KPIs to find out the effect on profit and cost reduction. This step also involves providing corrective measures in case of deviation from the project. Then it involves generating short-term gains in terms of increasing revenue. This will help to motivate stakeholders and infuse hope and confidence that the change is actually working. Also, make sure to celebrate small wins, for example, by congratulating employees for their productivity. Next slide, please. Moving on, this graph shows the emotional roller coaster while implementing the change. Celebrating small wins will help to bring hope and motivation when the emotional states of stakeholders go down. It starts with naive optimism, followed by doubts about the change, then growing into hope, confidence, and finally satisfaction. Let's now move on to step 6 on the next slide. Step 6 is about increasing the scale of change. That is, bringing additional changes to the proposed solution in case it's needed. This can involve making more changes to the 7S if required. This step is also about managing conflicts. It is important to note that any change incur conflicts, and the causes are normally because employees are resistant to change. There might be disagreement to new objectives and means. There might be clashes between consultant and clients. Let's now move on to the next slide with managing conflicts. So how are we going to manage conflict? We are going to use the 6-step problem-solving model, which starts with defining the problem. For example, the employees might be in conflict with management for the change, and then we have to determine the root cause of the problem. That is, employees are resistant to the change. Then we have to develop alternative solutions, for example, training and development, effective communication, or maybe recruit new talent. Then we have to select a solution. We might select to provide training and development for employees to help them acquire important skills and knowledge. And we finally have to implement the solution, find out which skills is needed, and select an appropriate training provider to implement the training. And then we have to evaluate the outcome of this. That is, determine the performance of employees after the training. Let's now move on to step 7 on the next slide. Step 7 is about reinforcing the change. This involves rephrasing the new behavior, that is, make the change part of the organizational culture, and also promote ways to sustain the change for long term through constant communication. These steps also involve communicating to staff the benefits of reducing fleet and how it's helping the company. This will reinforce the change. Also, sanctions need to be taken against undesirable behaviors of staff. And finally, we are moving on to the evaluation of the implementation. So now we have to evaluate the implementation of fleet reduction. This can be done during the project by monitoring progress in terms of cost reduction and revenue for Maersk. Then there is quality assurance part, and also taking adaptive and corrective measures to ensure the implementation is done right. We will also have to evaluate the project outcome, that is, evaluating the success of implementation. Did the project achieve its objective? The long-term effects have to be evaluated as well in terms of cost reduction and profitability after reducing fleets. The next step is to evaluate the consultants. Normally, the project success determines the consultancy fee. The added value of the consultant needs to be taken into consideration as well. Then we have performance appraisal of individual consultants and managers. And then the consultant should not forget to take references. This will help them to earn a good reputation in the market. We also have to evaluate the process. Has the project been completed in time and within the budget? Has the solution been implemented properly? How well did the consultant and client work together? Moving on to the 5th step, that is about lessons learned. This will help to be more effective for future projects. The step 6 involves the way evaluation will take place. This will be done by collecting data in the form of hard data, for example, quantifiable facts. And finally, the last step is to terminate the project. This involves dealing with any loose end that might still exist. Then the consultant will provide the closing report to the client, and lastly, hand over the project documentation to Maersk. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for having listening for us. We have therefore seen the challenges, the possible solution, and how we are going to implement it. Thank you so much again for watching this presentation. The MDX consultant team is waiting for another challenge for a new case study. Thank you so much.